Mute myself. Well, I hope everybody's doing well this morning. We're going to be jumping right back into Moses today. I did. Well, at least you got that right and you didn't call it Star Wars. Oh, yeah. It gets on my last nerve. This is not Star Wars. This is Star Trek. You would think.
You would think.
Star Trek, Star Wars,
But some people just don't know the sci-fi stuff, you know? All right. So this morning, it may turn into 2 Sundays. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the problem with doing a character study, especially when you get into the book of Exodus, is that you're focusing on the person and not the stuff. And it's the stuff that happens that's so cool. So this may turn into a second Sunday where we focus on the stuff, just because it's cool.
Well, especially because I'm driving home from Galveston yesterday and I went, this is our turn off. He goes, we're home already? I'm like, yes, I've been driving forever. And he's been
It was great. I had my laptop really working as a laptop yesterday. It was fantastic. So as we continue through Moses, now remember, we are focusing on how God changed Moses throughout this whole experience that he was having, rescuing a people that didn't want to be rescued. And that's really what's going on. We found out early on that Moses is the type of person that he wants to jump in and rescue people. We see that ever since he became an adult. He was always trying to jump in to rescue people. The first time it was someone who needed to be rescued, but after that, not so much. And they weren't always grateful for what Moses did. So we've talked about God's protection and providence and how God set the stage for Moses to arrive. Then we talked about Moses's passion and his personality. That's where we started picking up on his desire to help those that couldn't help themselves. Then Moses's preparation and isolation. That's when God was preparing him in the wilderness of Midian for 40 years. Then Moses's encounter with God, and that we know is the burning bush encounter that he had. Then Moses' difficulty at home, and that's what shocked me when I found out that God actually confronts Moses and was going to kill him because he didn't have his family in order. And who saved him? The wife. So the only reason that happened, though, according to scholars, is because Moses was incapacitated. He was unable because he was already stricken unto death. And it was because his wife then circumcised the son and then took the blood and touched Moses' feet with the bloody knife. Then that restored Moses, and his family was clean and he was able to continue. And you're kind of shocked, aren't you? Yeah. So this is very different than what we learned on the 10 Commandments movie with Charlton Heston. Kind of missed that part. Yeah, they didn't do that. And now we're going to jump into a really changing point in Moses' life. Up until this point, he had been giving excuses. He was the reluctant hero. He didn't want to be used in this way, but now he's jumped in both feet and he's committed. And so as we move into encounter with Pharaoh, now we see that we see the promise of God working the way that God has intended. All right. So from last time, Moses asked permission from Jethro to take his family back to Egypt, but he didn't tell him the truth as to why. He didn't tell Jethro, I had an encounter with God. God has commanded me to go back to Egypt and rescue the Israelites. Not what he said at all. He said, I want to go see if my family's still alive.
And you know, when I remember studying
Right.
this, I was in junior high, early high school at the Christian school, and it never even crossed my mind that he wasn't being truthful. I was like, oh, that was just another reason why he wants to go back.
Yeah.
But now looking at it as an adult, I'm like, dude, rascal.
Well, he had already had an encounter with his brother Aaron. And so he
He's
would
already
have,
been to Aaron.
we only know that because of tenses, and I'm going to talk
Okay.
about that again today. But if you remember when Moses was arguing with God at the burning bush, he said, I don't want to do it, just send someone else. And God says, fine, I'll let your brother do the talking. You tell him what to say, but I'm only talking to you. He can talk to the people. And by the way, he's on his way here right now.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and we find out later that Aaron meets Moses there on the mountain at the burning bush.
Before he went to Jethro.
And we know that because of tenses. So we know that Moses already knows his family is alive. He knows that everybody's doing well. And so he outright lied
Okay.
to Jethro at this point. Okay. So while on their way, God confronts Moses with the intent to kill him unless he corrects something that he failed to take care of with his son.
Mhm.
Okay. And so he did. His wife Zipporah stepped in, remedied the situation. And then Aaron, under Moses' direction, delivers Yahweh's instructions to the elders, the Hebrew elders, and all the people believed. And it says that they not only were convinced, but they fell down and worshiped. They knew that this was the time that God was going to rescue them.
I thought he told him to go tell him to Pharaoh.
So he told, yeah, you're right. So the first instruction was go tell the elders everything that I've told you, Moses, and then bring your people out of Egypt. It was supposed to be that simple.
Not even involve Pharaoh.
No, Pharaoh wasn't even going to be involved. God was going to take care of that part.
Okay.
Right? But instead, Moses argues, complains, and everything. And then God says, fine, go take these words and these signs to Pharaoh. And what's Moses do? Go to the elders. So he's not doing what God is telling him to do from the get-go. And so he's all, I'll do it my way. And that's how he's approached this whole thing until today. Now we're going to get to the point where Moses has got his act together and he's going to follow the instructions of God. So Moses is now 80 years old. His brother was not the younger, but rather the elder of the two. He would have been 83 at this point. And this is hardly the age to get started on a new quest. Okay. At this point, you are an established patriarch of your family, and your responsibility is just to be teaching your grandchildren. Okay. That's what's supposed to be going on. And God says, no, I've got other plans for you. You're still able-bodied, so it's time for you to be a general.
So what was the average age of these?
Now, remember, this is just after the flood.
Right.
Okay. So the human life expectancy hadn't dropped down all the way yet. And so 120 is a good age.
Okay.
Okay. So they're still living on average like 50 years older
He's got like 40 years left in him.
than we are today. So he's still got, he's still got another 40 years in him. And we know that just because we know the rest of the story.
Right.
Okay. So Moses, through some difficult beginnings, had learned some hard lessons about obedience. And now, with the help of God, he had won the consent of the people. So though that was difficult and an intimidating task, there was a task that would prove to be more intimidating: standing in the face of the most powerful ruler on the planet at this time. So how could Moses do this? Well, the same way as Jesse's teaching us about Elisha. In 1 Kings 17, Elisha goes in front of Ahab, and Elisha the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, the king, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. Okay? And so what he's saying here is he has permission to stand in front of God. Okay? So Elisha is standing before God. So if one has permission to stand before God, he has the authority to stand before a king. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically God says, I'm the God of all kings. So if I give you permission, by default, you got permission to stand before them. That's the authority. Exactly, Gene. That's the authority that they were granted. And Moses has now been given that same authority. He's all timid about the whole thing. And I think there's a lot of history going on. Stacy had to help me kind of work through the connections here. But remember that Moses was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. And then we learned that that Pharaoh died. And now there's a new Pharaoh on the throne. Well, who's that Pharaoh in relation to the old one?
His son.
His son. So that means Moses is this guy's nephew.
Oh.
See, I went stepbrother. I was thinking stepbrother.
I went, no,
And
no.
so Stacy helped me kind of connect this the right way. And so Pharaoh's daughter and this new Pharaoh are brothers and sisters,
Mhm.
Oh.
right?
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right? And so
There.
Pharaoh's daughter adopted Moses. And so Moses is the adopted nephew of this new Pharaoh.
The original days of our lives.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, the scripture, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how
Also saying, is he older than the princess? Is he younger than the princess?
most likely younger,
Okay,
but this Pharaoh is going to be in his 60s at least.
yeah,
Moses, remember, didn't leave until he was 40.
so he knows him.
Oh, he knows him well.
Yeah.
He was in the palace
Uncle
with him.
Pharaoh.
Uncle Pharaoh, yeah, Uncle Pharaoh to be. So they knew each other
Sounds
quite
familiar.
well. And as we're going to find out today, remember, Moses was told by God, the people that want to kill you are now all dead.
Right,
Moses goes back home. He actually gets royal access immediately because he's still royal family.
because this Pharaoh didn't want him dead.
This Pharaoh didn't want him dead, no.
Yeah.
That's his uncle. So it was all good. So Moses immediately has all of his access and privilege restored to him as soon as he walks back into Egypt.
I never even thought of that.
I didn't either. But how else would a Hebrew slave have access, so much access
You mean Aaron?
to Pharaoh? No, Moses. Okay. So Moses, over the next several chapters, displays great submission to God and consequently has success. Remember, when he does exactly as God says, God's already gone out before him and plowed.
Mhm.
So Moses just gets to walk through and it's all nice and easy. And that's what we see right now. So success in our eyes would be releasing the children of Israel. Pharaoh, let my people go. Pharaoh says, okay, and off they go. But now God has different plans. God has a different measure. Success in God's eyes is measured by our obedience. So this was more of a lesson for Moses and the people of Israel than it was for the Egyptians. So when you start thinking about it in those terms, this is about Moses and the Israelites, not about the Egyptians. Now the plagues take on a different meaning. Okay? And that's what we're going to look at today. All right? So the first thing we need to look at is the birth of his submission. This is Moses early on and just saying, okay, God. So first, his presentation. Exodus 5:1 says, after this presentation to Israel's leaders, Moses and Aaron went and spoke to Pharaoh. They told him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go so that they may hold a festival in my honor in the wilderness." So remember, this is the original plan that God gave Moses. Go and get the people, rescue them from the yoke of their heavy burden, and bring them back here to the mountain so that they may have a festival in honor of me. That was the instructions that God had given. Okay. So this is one of many presentations that Moses makes to Pharaoh. We know, because we know the rest of the story, that he ends up before Pharaoh 11 times. Okay. So pay attention to the pronouns. Who's presenting?
Moses and Aaron.
Okay. So it's Moses and Aaron. Well, remember, that's not the original plan. The original plan was just Moses. So now we got Moses and Aaron that are presenting. Now pay attention to whose words they're using.
God.
These are God's words. So they're doing this right now, the way that God has allowed them to do it. God instructs Moses, these are the things that are supposed to be said, and these are the things that you are supposed to do. Then Moses takes that information to Aaron and says, these are the things that God wants you to say. And these are the things that I'm going to do. So now they're a team. And that's important because actually this makes sense in Pharaoh's court, because this is how gods operate. And our God explains this to Moses. So in verse 20, it says, as they left Pharaoh's court, they confronted Moses and Aaron. Now this they are the Hebrews.
Oh.
Who were waiting outside for them. The foreman, the slave drivers, said to them, may the Lord judge and punish you for making us stink before Pharaoh and his officials. You've put a sword into their hands, an excuse to kill us. So basically, Moses goes in there and says, hey, you need to let all the Israelites go. And we're going to go worship our God in the wilderness, which is exactly what God told him to do. There was eavesdroppers, and they heard Moses ask Pharaoh for this, and they knew Pharaoh's not going to let us go because we're too busy doing all of his work. And so now you've done and made Pharaoh mad, and now he's going to take it out on us. And so, wait a minute, they were just worshiping because God was going to rescue them. Did they not think they were going to have to leave? Actually, that's what. They didn't think they were going to have to leave. They thought they were still going to be enjoying all of the fruits of Egypt and not be slaves anymore. And they were going to be able to live like Egyptians. That's their idea. But that's not what God had in store. So now this is the Israelites talking to Moses again. And Moses is now confronted. Now, something that we need to remember is that when we're confronted and we're doing God's will, we need to be reminded of God's calling. Why are we doing this in the first place? It was supposed to be easy and now it's not. So why are we doing it? And God reminds us why we're doing it. And he does the same thing to Moses here. So Moses then appeals to God. This is Exodus 5, verse 22. Then Moses went back to the Lord and protested, why have you brought all of this trouble on your own people, Lord? Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh as your spokesman, he has been even more brutal to your people, and you've done nothing to rescue them. 6:1. Then the Lord told Moses, now you'll see what I will do to Pharaoh. When he feels the force of my strong hand, he'll let the people go. As a matter of fact, he will force them to leave his land. And God said to Moses, I am Yahweh, the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, God Almighty, the provider, but I didn't reveal my name, Yahweh, to them. So what's he saying to Moses?
He's revealing his almighty godness to them,
To who?
to Pharaoh, to the Hebrews,
To Moses.
to Moses.
Okay. Moses is kind of reverted back to the why me kind of thing. And God is saying, you know, your great ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the great things that I did with them. I didn't give them my personal name. I gave you my personal name. That's the get out of jail free card.
Boom.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is to you.
Okay.
Wouldn't that,
You are more special to me
yeah,
than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, how about that for reconfirming why you're here, Moses?
yeah, and so wouldn't Moses like, okay, fine, whatever, I'll
And
do
he
whatever.
did.
Yeah.
This was the point of change for Moses. Okay.
Wow.
Now, I reaffirmed my covenant with them, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Under its terms, I promised to give them the land of Canaan where they were living as foreigners. You can be sure that I have heard the groans of the people of Israel, who are now slaves to the Egyptians, and I am well aware of my covenant with them. Therefore, say to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. I will free you from your oppression, and I will rescue you from your slavery in Egypt. I will redeem you with a powerful arm and great acts of judgment. I will claim you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who has freed you from your oppression in Egypt. I will bring you into the land I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as your very own possession. I am the Lord. Okay, so this is pretty clear now. I made the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that their descendants were going to take this land. Guess what? You're the descendant. I'm giving you the land. So again, we're seeing God establish his perfect will. This is what he's planning on doing for Moses. But now we know the rest of the story. Didn't work out like this. And you got to ask why. Well, the answer again is Moses and its obedience. Okay, that's what's going on. Now, he made this prayer to God. Now, we need to understand that in this prayer, he wasn't questioning God. He wasn't being sassy. Okay, he's not saying, God, why did you send me? Why did you do this? And now they're in more trouble than they were in before. That's not what he's doing. This really was the question. God, I don't understand. You said you were going to rescue the people, and now they're in more trouble than they were before. So what's the plan here? So basically, he's just asking God, what's the plan?
Oh, see, I didn't do this.
So it's not sassy at this point, okay? And then God's promise. God explained that now he's using this opportunity to get the people, which is the Israelites and the Egyptians, to turn to him.
How many Egyptians turned?
You'll see. Okay, so this is a story now about redemption. Redemption out of slavery for the Israelites and redemption out of atheism, agnosticism, multi-god theism, polytheism
There you go.
from the Egyptians to turn them to God. Okay, the story has now gotten bigger. It's now involving the freedom of two nations, not just one. Okay, all right. Now, the cost of his submission. Now we've got the denying by the people. So this is chapter 6, verse 9. So Moses told the people of Israel what the Lord had said, but they refused to listen anymore. And they had become too discouraged by the brutality of their slavery.
So the elders listened to them. But
Well,
the people,
you're bringing up all the right questions in the right order.
okay.
Okay, So I'll feed you, little bird. All right, so let's recap. Moses came back to Egypt and told elders the story.
Yeah.
The elders and the people
Yeah.
believed in worship. Okay, and we see that from 431.
Mhm.
The people were convinced. It wasn't just the elders.
Okay.
And all of them worshiped. Okay. Moses talks to Pharaoh. He doubles their labor by making them collect their own straw to make the bricks. The people complain about what Moses did. They refuse to listen because of the brutality of their slavery. They refused to listen, not refuse to believe. They already believe. They just refuse to listen. So it's basically la 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 la, I'm not hearing you anymore. That's what they're doing at this point. Okay. They know the truth. They believe, they worship, but they're like, this believing stuff is too hard. It's hurting me. I don't want to hurt anymore. So let's just kind of ignore that
But still believe.
and go back to the way we were doing it before. So God, I believe you're going to save me, but I don't want to jump out of the fire. Okay. So in 6:10, it says, then the Lord said to Moses, go back to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and tell him to let the people of Israel leave his country. Uh-oh. Verse 12. But Lord, Moses objected, my own people won't listen to me anymore. Okay, so now he's back to the same old excuse. How can I expect Pharaoh to listen? I'm such a clumsy speaker. But the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them orders for the Israelites and for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord commanded Moses and Aaron to lead the people out of Egypt.
Moses didn't even speak.
So Moses isn't even doing the talking. So how is he giving this excuse?
Speaker.
Okay, so God gives his instructions. Moses gives an old objection. Silly man. God already provided Aaron.
Right.
So this doesn't fly. Okay.
And apparently Aaron has no objection to talking to Pharaoh.
No, he loved to talk. And that's what God said.
Okay.
Let's get Aaron. He loves to talk. Okay. And that's kind of what we're supposed to infer at the burning bush experience.
Okay.
That, hey, let's let Aaron, because he was kind of goading Moses. God was goading Moses and saying, hey, let's get your brother Aaron. He's a great talker. Remember, I said that he talked a lot, but he didn't have any substance. Okay. And that's exactly. And that's why God says to Moses, you are my representative. Aaron is your mouthpiece. God is not wanting to be connected to Aaron. And we'll find out why later that Aaron is all the trouble. He is trouble from this point on. God is now giving orders for the Israelites and the Egyptians. The command stays the same for Moses and Aaron. The Lord said to Moses, see, this is important. I have made you as God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. So now God is telling Moses, the Egyptians have a different way of doing things.
I see.
And I'm setting the stage now for you to behave and be viewed in such a way by God that you will be more effective. Okay, so basically you're going to play by Pharaoh's rules. Okay? As for you, you will speak all that I commanded you, and your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh that he let the sons of Israel go out of his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the lands of Egypt. When Pharaoh does not listen to you, I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring out my what? Armies. God is now letting Moses into more of the plan. God is not only bringing out a people, a religious people, but he's bringing out a conquering people. Okay. God is laying out more of the plan, but Moses doesn't see it. Okay, my people, the sons of Israel, from the land of Egypt by great judgments. Okay, all right. So then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Remember, this is about the rescuing of two nations, not only Israel out of bondage, but now Egyptians out of paganism. Okay, when I extend my hand over Egypt and bring out the sons of Israel from their midst. So Moses and Aaron did this as the Lord commanded them. So they did. And Moses was 80 years old, Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you saying, work a miracle, then you will say to Aaron, take your staff, throw it down before Pharaoh so that it may turn into a serpent. So Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and so they did, just as the Lord commanded. And Aaron threw his staff down before Pharaoh and his servants, and it turned into a serpent. So, the declaring of the Lord. The Lord said he was going to turn the rod into a serpent. And in chapter 7, verse 10, it says that Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded. No more excuses.
Did it.
Now they're like, okay, we see that this is bigger than us. So we're going to do what you say. And they do. They follow exactly to a T what God commands them to do. Okay. So they turned the rod into a serpent. And guess what? The magicians, they said, oh, we can do that. And they turned their rods into serpents as well. So Pharaoh's heart was hardened. That's not magic. Well, it's not any more magic than my people can do. Okay. So then the next thing is they turned the water of the Nile into blood. And in chapter 7, verse 20, it says that Moses and Aaron did exactly as the Lord commanded. Okay. But the magicians duplicated it. Now, I think that's kind of funny because they've already turned all of the Nile into blood. Well, they happen to have some other Nile water in pots. And so the magicians turned that into blood too. And now guess what? They've got nothing to drink. There is no water to drink. And scripture actually tells us that Pharaoh commands the people to go and dig wells. So they went and dug water wells. And that's how they got their fresh water.
So more work for the Egyptians.
More work for the Hebrews. And again, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Now, in this case, he's hardened it himself, right? My guys can do the same thing you're doing, so that's no big deal.
This is only the second trip back.
So now we're on the third trip. This is now the plague of frogs. So God commands Moses and Aaron to go before Pharaoh again and says, I'm going to choke you with frogs. The magicians were able to do the same thing. So not only did they have some frogs, now they got lots of frogs. Okay. But this time, Moses asks Pharaoh, no, Pharaoh asks Moses to pray to his God for relief. So now we're getting through now to Pharaoh.
Back in the bag. Well, that's pretty much over.
But as soon as God prayed, or as soon as God delivered on Moses' prayer, Pharaoh said, phew, that's over. Good. No, you can't go. Okay. Now keep track of this because this becomes a recurring theme. All right. Then we've got the plague of lice or gnats. It gets defined because there was no differentiation in the word. And so it's insects. Sometimes they just say insects. Okay. So God lays it all out before Moses and Aaron. And in chapter 8, verse 16 and 17 shows us that they do exactly as the Lord commanded. And the magicians couldn't duplicate this. And they turn and tell Pharaoh, no, this is the finger of God. This is God's word.
Brett, you want to give them like it?
The magicians at this point now have another God that they can add to their list.
Before we leave, okay, I've got to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
So what are their laws to eat the gnats and lice? Important.
Yeah. Now remember now, Moses answered Pharaoh's prayer and the frogs dispersed.
Oh, okay.
And only the way it was specific. It said, remove all the frogs that are not in the Nile. So at least they were ecologically sound. Okay. They saved all the frogs that were still in the Nile.
The blood.
Chilling.
So now Pharaoh's heart's again hardened, even though his magicians said, this is the finger of God. It didn't say Pharaoh hardened his heart. It says Pharaoh's heart was hardened.
It's God's plan.
So now we've got God stepping in, saying, okay, I'm getting to Pharaoh. I don't need him to give up so quick.
God did it just the last
He's gonna get more people, not just the magicians.
Right. So he's got some people believing,
Okay.
but
time.
not all.
Egyptians believing now.
Yeah. So
Wow.
then we've got a plague of flies. In this case, though, God just tells Moses and Aaron, go tell Pharaoh, I'm going to choke the land with flies. Pharaoh and Moses and Aaron didn't have to do anything. There was no, they did as the Lord commanded. There was no actions needed on their
God
part,
did it.
because now the magicians know that this is God working. It's not Moses and Aaron. Okay. And what's cool is that the flies only affected the Egyptians. Now imagine this. You've seen swarms of gnats, right? And you're walking and the gnats just bothering you and you can't get the gnats to go away. And there's somebody next to you and the gnats aren't bothering them. And it's like, how come the gnats aren't bothering you? Well, this is what's going on. The Israelites are walking around, like it's a regular day. And all the Egyptians are doing this bit, trying to get rid of all the flies.
Do we need these?
It's not affecting the Israelites at all. Pharaoh says, okay, why don't you just let all of your people do their festival here and they can sacrifice to your God and you can just have all of the freedom that you need to do it here. But Moses said no, because he knows the laws of Egypt and he knows that you cannot sacrifice a bull in Egypt.
Oh, no,
Because the bull
a
is
god.
one of their gods.
Yeah.
And he says, Pharaoh, our sacrifice is going to offend all of your people.
Mhm.
So we would rather not do this here. We have to go.
Already offended.
We're already in trouble.
Canceling.
Yeah. So let's not get more in trouble. So Pharaoh says, okay, you can take the people, but just don't go too far away. Just go to the outskirts of town, maybe. Okay, don't go too far away. And then Pharaoh asks, that's Moses.
Moses.
Pharaoh asks Moses to pray for relief, and he gets it. And guess what? Pharaoh says, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
It's all good now. God stepped in and stopped it, so you got to stay. All right. So now we've got the plague on livestock. Again, no actions are required. God tells Moses and Aaron, okay, I'm going to kill all of their livestock. Yours are going to be safe. So all of the Israelite livestock, all the stuff in Goshen that they were originally hired to do in Goshen, they're all going to be safe. But all the livestock that's here in town under the Egyptian areas, that's all going to be killed. Only the Egyptian livestock dies. Pharaoh sent people over to Goshen and say, hey, see if the Israelites' livestock died. And they got confirmation that the Israelites' livestock are all still alive and well. And Pharaoh's heart was unyielding. Different word this time.
Right.
Unyielding. So now he's mad.
That's what I was
And he's
thinking.
like, no, I'm not going to let you go because now you're bringing all this calamity on me and my people. Okay. So now he's mad. So his heart is unyielding. Then we've got the plague of boils. All right. Now think about the plagues so far. They've been plagues over nature. They've been
Water.
plagues of, like water,
Yeah.
and land and insects and animals.
Right.
But
Now
now
this
we've
is
got a
personal.
plague of boils. So now God's instructions are a little bit different again. God is like, okay, he's not getting this. So now we need to make sure that Pharaoh understands that your commands to Moses are directly related to all of these pains that are happening to the Egyptians. So God tells Moses to go into a kiln where they fire their pottery Did I say that right? Yes. They fire their pottery and go in and pull the ashes out of that kiln and take it before Pharaoh and say, if you don't let my people go, then I'm going to cast these ashes into the air and it will turn into painful sores on all of your people. And so he throws it up in the air. All of the Egyptians are plagued with painful boils all over their body. The thrown ashes turn to boils, and it's only on the Egyptians. So the magicians, they were too incapacitated to even try. Scripture tells us that they just fell down in agony.
Then they down.
Okay. They couldn't even try to reproduce or cure. And that's one of the things that the magicians are there for. They were also,
Doctors.
Or remedy.
yeah. So they were responsible for bloodletting and whatever was necessary in order to cure these kinds of diseases. And they were all too incapacitated to even try. And Moses just says, see ya, and takes off. Okay. Didn't even wait for for Pharaoh to even harden his heart. He just said, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, so I'm out. And he just strolls out of there, no problem. Pharaoh says, okay, take the people,
Huh?
but not too far away. And the next morning, Moses confronts Pharaoh, and he says that God could have just killed them all as easily as giving them boils. But he wanted the Egyptians to witness. But at this point, it says that the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. And now God steps in. Basically, it's now crossed that threshold by showing his power, God's power over your physical body, right? It was enough to convince Pharaoh. But God says, I'm not done. And so he hardens Pharaoh's heart. Then we got the plague of hail. This is another situation where God commanded Moses to raise his hands over Egypt, and God would cause lightning and wind and hail mixed with fire to fall down from the heavens. They were given a warning to protect their replacement livestock. Okay, so basically the Egyptians said, oh yeah, all that livestock you've been keeping for us, we're taking it.
Exactly.
And so now they took the livestock from the Israelites, and now this is ours. So now they've got replacement livestock, and they said, Moses told them, warn your people, if they want to keep their livestock, to put them under shelter. Make sure that your people are under shelter.
So shouldn't Pharaoh's people be getting mad at Pharaoh by this time?
You're going to see something here in a minute. So hail and fire fell, destroying all the unprotected animals and the trees and the plants. It said it stripped the leaves from the plants. Okay? But it didn't happen where the Israelites lived. Any place where an Israelite was spared. So it wasn't just in the land of Goshen. No, there's Israelites that are in Egypt. And wherever they were, people, the livestock, and the land was spared. But all of the Egyptian people, livestock, and land were stripped. Verse 27, Pharaoh admits that this time I have sinned. The Lord, that means he referred to him as Yahweh God. The Lord was righteous and my people are wicked. Wait a minute, something's missing here. I'm not wicked. My people are wicked. Okay, so it's their fault. It's not my fault. Okay, so Pharaoh is still working with a hardened heart. But Pharaoh says, plead with the Lord, O Moses. Remember, I told you, keep track of this. This is now the third time that Pharaoh is asking Moses to pray for Egyptian relief. Pharaoh's heart was hardened Now, again, this was happening to him. So God is hardening his heart, his and his servants.
Oh,
So now the servants are back to being mad at Moses instead of saying, yeah, your God's powerful. Then we've got another plague, the plague of Moses, or the plague of locusts. So Moses again is commanded to lift his arms over the land of Egypt. Okay. And God caused a strong east wind to blow in this devouring type of locust. God explains to Moses that he has hardened Pharaoh's heart. Okay. So that he may perform these miracles, and the Israelite children and grandchildren will know how God dealt harshly with the Egyptians. So now God's purpose is still the same. I need to try to pull these Egyptians out of their paganism, but at the same time, I'm doing this to show the Israelites that I am in control of everything, every aspect of your life, every aspect of nature, even life itself. Okay? Moses and Aaron then tell Pharaoh that if he doesn't let the people go and worship the Lord, that he will send locusts to cover the ground and consume everything. And they just leave Pharaoh. Didn't even wait for an answer. Oh, by the way, if you're not going to let us go, all the locusts come and destroy everything. So see ya. He's off again. Pharaoh's people advised him that letting the slaves go would result in economic ruin. Okay. Everything else has been destroyed. Okay. Pharaoh says, okay, all of the men can go, but we know that if you take everyone, you're not coming back. So you're going to do evil if you leave. So just take the guys, leave the women and children behind, because that way we'll know you'll come back after your festival. So all this time now, Pharaoh's thinking, I'm doing good. I'm trying to meet you halfway here. He's trying to bargain with Moses. Well, how come Pharaoh hadn't killed Moses yet? He's his nephew. He's still royal. So he still has rights and privileges. Okay? Not in the same family. This isn't Rome.
Oh,
All right. So Moses and Aaron are now driven out of Pharaoh's presence by his servants. God commands Moses to stretch out his hand over Egypt so that the locusts could devour anything left by the hail. Pharaoh confessed his sin again and asks Moses to intercede with prayer. And now God sends a strong west wind, blows all of the locusts away. And then God hardens Pharaoh's heart. God's not done. Plague of darkness. So there's no warning this time. Basically, God says, don't even go before Pharaoh. We're not even going to do that this time. So God instructs Moses on what he's supposed to do. Moses stretched out his hand, and darkness falls everywhere except where the Israelites were for 3 days. Now we've got a situation where Egyptians are groping around trying to figure out where to go, and there's a Hebrew servant right next to them that's in full light, just doing whatever they need to do.
that is so weird.
Okay, so it's not like a localized eclipse of the sun. No, this is a blanket of darkness over all the Egyptians, and light was only where the Israelites were. Okay, that's a crazy miracle. All right, Pharaoh told Moses to take all the people, but leave the livestock. Okay, because we don't have any more. So you just go take all of your people, but leave the stuff. Again, Pharaoh thinks that he's bargaining now. He's trying. But Moses tells him, no, we need to take the livestock because it's a journey to get there. We're going to need some for food. I mean, we are trying to fill several million people's bellies. And we need to have livestock for our sacrifice, for the festival. Okay. Pharaoh expels
They
Moses,
were never let him fire. They always.
get out of my sight, threatens to kill him if they
When
see
Brett
each other
started
again.
looking at me,
And Moses says,
Um,
you got it. Now,
he
here
wanted-
we've run into a problem where you have to understand Hebrew tenses to figure out the order of things.
Thank goodness for the Lord.
In chapter 11,
And Uncle Ross.
it moves into a story within a story,
What?
okay? And you know this only because of the way that the verbs
Yeah.
are tensed. It's easy to miss it in English, but it is there. It's an unfortunate chapter break. Okay, remember the Bible was originally written and it didn't have chapters and verses. It was just a continuous string of Hebrew and
And
Greek.
it does.
Okay, it wasn't until the 1300s that somebody decided to put chapters and verses in.
I mean, like, not
So
even.
this is an unfortunate chapter break because it's like sometime later is this idea that we get, oh, no, this is the same conversation. Okay, so Moses says, fine, you want me out of here? Great, but before I go. So that's what's going on. Now we know that this is a story in a story because we see the verb tense. We're looking back on the conversation. In chapter 11, verse 1, it says, the Lord had said. Okay, so now it's past participle. We're now looking back. So this is a story in a story. So why is this separated as being a separate story? Yeah, this is the Passover. This sets up the Passover, the most important celebration in Israelite years.
Turn on
Okay,
that.
so this is meant to be a standalone story that is memorized and repeated by everyone from generation to generation. Okay, so it's just an important. Moses didn't give any warning. He just said, okay, I know you want me out of your sight, but here's what's going to happen. And so Moses lays out to Pharaoh what's going to happen, along with a prophecy that Pharaoh's people would be giving the command to let the Israelites go. All right, so you had asked earlier, aren't Pharaoh's people kind of getting upset at Pharaoh now? They see that Moses is giving warning and Pharaoh is unyielding. So yeah, the people are upset at Pharaoh at this point. Okay, and we're going to see just how upset in a little bit. And then Moses was hot with anger. He tells us, with anger, even though everything had happened just the way God told Moses back in chapter 4. Back in chapter 4, God says all of these calamities are going to happen, but Pharaoh is not going to let the people go until the death of his firstborn
What
son.
is this?
God warned that back in chapter 4, and now here we are in chapter 11. Everything has happened, and now we're at this point. All right, so no doubt some amazing lessons transpired in the life of the nation of Israel. They're seeing all of these things happening to the Egyptians, but they're being spared from it. So obviously, their lives are being changed because of seeing how strong God is throughout all of this. But we also see God teaching and training his servant Moses. We know the rest of the story. We know what the next 40 years are going to be like. He's out there trying to guide these people through the desert, and they're not cooperating every step of the way. All of this is preparatory for what's going to lay ahead for Moses. God's not done with his people, nor is he done with Moses. He has many more lessons to learn. So memory verse this week is Philippians 3:13. We're used to 4:13. This is 3:13. But one thing I do, forgetting what's behind and straining towards what's ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Jesus Christ. So we are going through bad stuff daily. And it's very easy to look back on this bad stuff, saying, Why am I even continuing? All of this bad stuff's happening to me. Why should I even do it? Well, that's why God says, don't look behind you. And any good farmer knows when they're plowing, you can't look to see where you've already plowed, because then all of your rows are going to be wandering all over the place.
Like that one.
You have to look ahead to a point in the future and keep your eyes focused there. This is actually what Paul is telling the Philippians. Just like farming, fix your gaze to that prize, and everything will turn out okay. Quit focusing on the bad that's happening, and instead focus on the promise that's ahead of you. Okay? All right. So that's all I have for you this week. Any questions?
I think the last word,
He knows the last word.
Hey, everybody knows that last plague, yeah.
yeah, so tell all the firstborn things it's just.
Yep. And it even killed the firstborn of royalty all the way down to servants
And animals.
and the animals.
And it didn't
Okay,
matter.
well,
if
these are pets too.
boys or girls, it didn't matter if it was
Firstborn son.
Okay, I was asking.
Yep,
That's what I wondered.
firstborn son,
Okay.
firstborn man. And it's one of the questions that I always had was it generational?
I mean,
So if there's like a grandparent, was their firstborn
I wondered
killed
too.
too as a parent?
Yeah,
And it says no, the child of. So it's younglings.
okay, it wasn't.
It wasn't adult firstborns.
Younglings.
Yes, sir. We will have Monday school. All right. Any other questions?
No, only children.
Only children.
All right, cool. So notice the whole step of the way, Moses just said, okay. And he did exactly what God commanded, and everything played out exactly as God intended.
So when it said he was burning with anger or whatever, was he mad at Pharaoh or was he mad that?
He was just couldn't believe that Pharaoh wouldn't. But God told
I
Moses
know.
ahead of time, I'm going to harden his heart so
Yeah.
that he won't give up too soon. So it's all part of the plan. But again, we see Moses's temperament come out here. And this is something that continues to plague Moses for the next 40 years. He gets angry. And when he gets angry, bad things happen. Okay, kind of like Hulk, don't make me angry. All right, y'all. I'll see you in worship.
Yes, sir.
So, like there were the 80s, but they're walking like the 50s or oh my.
Well, 80s back then are like 50s now.
That's why they had that have another 40 years.